And we're live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, How Oil and Gas Pollution Harms Our Health and Our Future, which is hosted by Colorado Mountain Mamas and Moms Clean Air Force. My name is Patrice Tomczyk, and I am the project manager of state campaigns for Moms Clean Air Force, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. A few housekeeping things I want to cover before we begin the presentations. If you have questions, please feel free to type them in the questions box. At the end of the presentations, we will open up the webinar for questions and answers. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can in the allotted time. If there are questions that we don't have time to answer, we'll follow up with an email, but please provide your email address so we can send you a reply to your question. The questions are set to private and can only be seen by the group that is presenting today. The chat feature is open to the public, so feel free to use this function. Now I'd like to go through the lineup of our guest speakers. To kick off the webinar today will be Laurie Anderson, who is a Colorado field organizer with Moms Clean Air Force. She will be presenting an introduction to oil and gas operations for about 15 minutes. Next up will be Dr. Corey Carroll, who is the chair for Physicians for Social Responsibility in Colorado, and he will be presenting the consequences of methane pollution on health for about 15 minutes. Then Shana Oliver, who is the Colorado field organizer with Moms Clean Air Force, will be presenting communities disproportionately impacted by pollution for about 10 minutes. Finally, Jen Clanahan, the state director for Mountain Mamas, will be presenting how to effectively take action for about 10 minutes. After all the presenters have spoken, I will open up the question and answer session, and we will go through as many questions as we can in that 10 minutes at the end of the webinar until 7:30 p.m. Now I'd like to turn it over to Laurie Anderson with Moms Clean Air Force for her presentation.
Thank you for joining us today. As we explore recent legislation and upcoming hearings related to oil and gas development and how you can have your voice heard. My name is Laurie Anderson, and I'm a Colorado field organizer with Moms Clean Air Force. Before we dive into the legislative and technical aspects, I would like to provide a little bit about my background on how I got involved with oil and gas development. Next slide, please. Everyone has their own story about how they became engaged, but we all have in common the desire to protect health, safety, and the environment. So a little about me. I moved to Colorado from Wisconsin back in 2015. I was attracted to this peaceful community with a spectacular view of the mountains. I was a former mechanical engineer, a mom of 5 kids, and my youngest was about to enter kindergarten. And Wisconsin did not have oil and gas development, so I was in for a shock. In 2016, I heard about a proposal to do large-scale fracking on multiple sites near my home. Despite having no previous experience on policy or legislation, I had to take action. My first inclination was to raise awareness of this atrocity, and surely this wouldn't go forward, so I formed a group of concerned residents with a mission to protect public health, safety, and the environment. My passion for change was strong. I spoke out at every opportunity that presented itself, even if I had my youngest in my arms. Now fast forward to last year. This image that you're looking at is a view from my deck with a faint view of the mountains in the background. I took this picture last summer when the drill rig went up on the Livingston site, which marked the day when I had to come to terms with the fact that despite raising awareness to the very real health, safety, and environmental impacts, drilling and fracking at this site, just a half a mile from my house, was going to happen. It felt like I lost the fight, that my community lost the fight, but for me, it wasn't over. It was at that point in time that someone said to me that they admired my tenacity. And it was then that I realized just how many of us are tenacious. We never give up, and we never stop trying until we reach our goal of protecting public health, safety, and welfare. So for those of you who have joined us, who have been speaking out, thank you. And to those who are new, we need to hear your voice and appreciate that you have joined us today. Next slide, please. Last year, Colorado passed landmark legislation intended to protect public health and the climate from oil and gas air pollution, including these 2 critical bills. Senate Bill 181 requires protection of public welfare from oil and gas operation and requires the Air Quality Control Commission, also known as the AQCC, and the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission, also known as the COGCC, to minimize emissions from these operations. House Bill 1261, the Climate Action Plan to Reduce Pollution, set goals to reduce emissions, including a 2025 goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 26%. Passing legislation is just the first step. Next, that legislation needs to be implemented into the rules. For these two bills, rules need to be modified at both the AQCC and the COGCC. Next slide, please. There are important rulemaking hearings coming up. This is a high-level overview of the topics that will be covered at these hearings. I will be going over the technical aspects of these items in the following slides, and then you'll hear more about the specific requests that individuals like yourself can make regarding specific policies. The Air Quality Control Commission will be reviewing a document known as Regulation 7, which covers the control of ozone, including monitoring and controlling of emissions during what is called the pre-production phase, emissions from natural gas-fired engines used on site, emissions at oil and gas injection facilities, and emissions related to pneumatic controllers. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is also undergoing a series of changes to their rules, including flaring and venting, which is covered under what they call the 900 series of rules. So let's take a look at how methane is related to oil and gas production, and then we'll dive into the technical details. Next slide, please. Methane is the main component of natural gas. It is a potent greenhouse gas, which is up to 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide. It's harmful to air quality and accounts for 25% of today's climate change. Why is this important? When operators drill for oil and gas, there are two separate products that come back up, crude oil and natural gas, which is heavy on methane. Next, we'll step through the phases of oil and gas development to better familiarize you with the terminology. Next slide, please. Pre-production covers several phases of a process that is often simply referred to as fracking, to produce oil and gas from shale formations. We will go over each of these phases individually. Pre-production includes the development of infrastructure such as pipelines that will ultimately transport natural gas, drilling, fracking, and flowback and early production. This slide covers infrastructure. The image on the right shows crews working on an underground pipeline. The bottom image shows the completed pipeline at the same site. You can also see a sound wall being constructed in the far background at a new well site. Next is drilling operations. Next slide. Okay. Drilling is, most simply put, the process of creating the vertical and lateral hole in the ground. This hole is also referred to as a wellbore. Currently, oil and gas operations in the DJ Basin in Colorado drill down about 7,000 feet before turning their drill bits horizontally into the shale formation and drilling out another 3 miles under our communities. This image shows a drill rig in Broomfield, and you can see the rooftops of the homes less than a quarter mile away in the background. Now that the well has been drilled, next is fracking. Next slide, please. Fracking is the process where the operator injects a mixture of water, sand, and chemicals into the wellbore under high pressure. The fracking process requires multiple powerful engines working simultaneously to create the required pressure to push this chemical mixture deep into the wellbore. The picture on the right shows a fracking operation. The top image shows black, smoky emissions of chemicals rising from behind a sound wall, including nitrous oxides, also known as NOx, and particulate matter, also known as PM. NOx emissions continue to significantly impair Colorado's haze and ozone pollution problems, and rigorous NOx pollution standards must be required for engines that power oil and gas operations. These emissions can be drastically reduced through cleaner options. Following the fracking operation, these wells remain under pressure and filled with the water, sand, and chemicals that will eventually be allowed to return to the surface through a process known as flowback. Next slide, please. Flowback, just as the name suggests, is a process where the water and chemicals that were injected underground are allowed to flow back to the surface. This fluid mixture that comes back up is referred to as produced water. Flowback can be done 2 different ways. Operators can use on-site storage tanks to contain the produced water, or they can send it directly down a pipeline. The image on the top is a large-scale operation in Weld County where you can see oil and gas tanks in the foreground and production equipment in the background. Only natural gas is piped from this site, and oil and produced water will need to be trucked away. The image on the bottom is a similar sized large-scale operation in Broomfield County with pipelines for oil, natural gas, and produced water. Here, you only see the production equipment and no tanks. The first sellable natural gas, which denotes the beginning of early production, occurred simultaneously as the flowback phase began. So now the operator has oil and natural gas to sell, but they also have enormous quantities of produced water containing toxic chemicals that need to be disposed of. Next slide, please. The produced toxic wastewater that we just discussed needs to be disposed of and is trucked or transported via pipeline to locations known as underground injection well facilities. The image on the top shows an injection facility in Weld County. You can see the storage tanks where the produced water will be held and ultimately injected deep underground at a controlled rate and pressure. There are many concerns related to underground injection facilities, but I am going to focus on just the emissions. The bottom image is a picture that was taken with a specialized piece of equipment known as a FLIR camera. It's F-L-I-R, that can detect emissions that are not visible to the naked eye. These images show emissions, including benzene, rising from the tanks as produced water is being unloaded from a truck to the on-site storage tank. The emissions at injection facilities pose a hazard to the surrounding communities. That is the final step in oil and gas development we will cover. Next, we will take a deeper look at emissions. Next slide, please. Leaks of emissions can occur at any point in the massive oil and gas infrastructure, including at valves, pump seals, and any other component. These two images show examples of leaks that were discovered using the FLIR camera. Finding and repairing unintended leaks leads to a significant reduction of emissions. Now we will look at some equipment that is intentionally designed to leak emissions to the atmosphere. Next slide, please. Pneumatic devices are used to automate equipment and can be used to maintain a process condition such as maintaining a liquid at a specified level, holding a certain pressure, or keeping equipment at a set temperature. These pneumatic devices come in multiple types, with some designed to intentionally leak natural gas to the atmosphere. The devices that are designed to emit are called continuous bleed devices. Devices that are designed so they recapture the natural gas and therefore do not emit gas are called zero bleed devices. The image on the right shows a FLIR camera image of emissions coming from a continuous bleed pneumatic device. So why is this important? Pneumatic controllers are used in high quantities at oil and gas operations, so emissions from these devices add up significantly. Zero bleed pneumatic devices should be used when possible, or alternative controllers should be used that do not leak natural gas. Next, we will look at another example of emissions known as venting and flaring. Next slide, please. Flaring is a process of burning off natural gas. The image on the right shows a flaring operation that most of us have seen driving around the rural areas where oil and gas development is occurring. The image on the left is an enclosed combustion device that has an internal flare and is designed to capture 98% of emissions when operating properly. Some of you may be wondering why an operator would flare natural gas, which could be sold and used. Operators will choose to flare natural gas if they do not have adequate pipeline capacity to transport the gas to market, or if the economic conditions make it cheaper for the operator to flare natural gas, which comes up from the ground, with the more profitable oil. These types of routine flaring are avoidable. Another reason to flare natural gas is in an emergency situation, such as during high pressure surges to prevent an explosion. So flaring is bad, but a process known as venting is even worse. Venting is when the operator releases gas directly to the atmosphere, and this should be avoided. With all this discussion about emissions, my final topic is going to be air quality monitoring. Next slide, please. Air quality monitoring is a process of measuring the pollution in the air. Here are two examples of air quality monitoring stations. The trailer on the left is a station that continuously measures the air quality through sophisticated equipment with extremely accurate measurements and also measures multiple chemicals at the same time and also chemical compounds. The station on the right also measures data continuously, but only measures a single value for all the chemicals combined. And although it cannot accurately measure the exact chemicals in the air, it can detect a significant overall spike in emissions. Air quality is rapidly advancing as the state and local governments collect data and refine the processes being used. It is important to establish a baseline of the air quality before oil and gas operations are planned. The air quality monitoring system design depends on four main factors. The sampling frequency should be continuous so that spikes in emissions are not missed. The locations need to be carefully chosen close to the site and also to monitor multiple locations since the winds change directions. Pollutants of concern need to be monitored and the results need to be accurate. Regardless of the chosen monitoring method, it is critical for transparency that the public is able to see the data via an online portal and that the data is available near real time. Impacted residents want to know when a spike in emissions is occurring and not after the fact. Next slide, please. So thank you for your time. And now I would like to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Corey Carroll from Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Great, Laurie, thank you so much. You did the introduction to fracking and also some of the graduate courses. Very complicated topic. Before I became a doctor, I was an engineer, and A lot of engineering work is involved with that technology. The problem is what else happens. As Laurie mentioned, I'm a family physician now. I've been practicing in Fort Collins for about 30 years, and I am the chair of the PSR Colorado chapter. This is a group of folks that are trying to elevate the voices of scientists and citizens to help stop the insanity, if you will. And fracking is one, certainly in Colorado. I would encourage you to check out our website, which is shown on that slide, psrcoloradospelledout.org, because in December, we're going to have a medical symposium that's going to go into greater detail, which you just heard in 10 minutes. It's going to be an all day. But it's critically important for us to spread this word. Next slide, please. So my focus today is, pretty impressive, but I'm going to try to distill it so that you get kind of the understanding and the nuance of this. So methane on health is not just the methane, but it's all the things that are with it. As Laurie mentioned, natural gas is mainly methane. That's what we use to burn, but it also has other components, volatile organic compounds and other halogens that are very toxic to the human being, any living being. When you burn it in the home, you all have the carbon monoxide monitors that you want to basically have and running, because if you don't completely burn it well, CO will bind to your hemoglobin and interfere with oxygen. Number one big reason why people are in the emergency room and very concerning. Also CO2, not something that's going to be harmful to us because we produce it, but very harmful to the planet. Methane, extremely harmful. CO2 also is a greenhouse gas. And that's the other piece of it is Laurie was talking about the extraction and storage. But remember, this is piped all over the place. And methane leaks are a problem. I'll show that next. And then rare, but it's a concern. This is an explosive gas. You all probably smelled the sulfur. That's the addition of a methyl mercaptan, which is added by the petroleum industry to warn people there is an explosive product nearby and hopefully vent. Next slide, please. So on the right side of the screen is the carbons. You see the larger carbon you get into the oils and gases and jet fuel and diesel fuel. Come on, we all know these things are really bad for us. The hard part with the gases is they're just very hard to see. As we just learned, you have the flaring, which is the burning of the gas. The venting, as Laurie pointed out, can only be seen with specialized infrastructure. But the kind of the red and yellow spikes coming out of the ground, that's in Boston, and that's basically a measurement of methane leaks, and this is having to do with the transportation. So when you're seeing this product going out to the world, guess what? There are seams, there are connectors, and we're not doing any of the forced venting that can occur to prevent an explosion at a wellhead, but definitely there's leaks. Terrible for the planet. Next slide, please. Now, methane isn't a bad thing in general. It's just too much of it in the wrong place. We love it because it does provide heat. And we use that heat mainly in homes to cook our food, to heat our water, to heat our air. So we have appliances that are basically burning a fossil fuel. The misnomer is it's natural gas. It is a fossil fuel. And as such, it is bad for us in the pure sense of the word, and when you burn it, and bad for the planet. The PSR Colorado has a initiative called the Healthy Electric Home, and we're trying to get people to understand if you can replace some appliances with electric appliances, especially the stovetops. That's great. You don't have to buy a whole new stove. You can buy like an induction or a little portable electric piece, and that's marvelous to not have to turn on the stove. But if you do, make sure you have the vent running full steam, because you need to pull the volatile organic compounds, the nitric oxides, all these things that are bad for us out of the house. And please maintain your devices down in your mechanical room, the water heater and the air furnace, because those need to be vented as well. Next slide, please. So what's the deal about organic chemistry? Most of my colleagues getting into medical school dreaded this course. I found it fascinating, but this really is the explanation for why we as human beings have to worry about it. Next slide. I want to not go into the absolute chemistry, but just think about the phenomenon of cooking a marvelous meal. Let's make sure it's complicated. Lots of ingredients. Now, a good chef or anybody cooking wants fresh, healthy, and the correct ingredients. If you got spoilage, if you have something that basically has contaminated the food, not only will it be a disaster when you put it on the table, but it can be very dangerous, food poisoning. Our bodies, think of them as these microscopic cooking factories that are making proteins and exchanging gases and helping deliver signals like the nervous system. They need the right ingredients. Put dangerous ingredients in, problems occur. Next slide. So in a simple way, the macronutrients, sugar, fat, protein. What I want you to point out on this slide is not the chemistry, but look at the C, carbon, H, hydrogen, O, oxygen. Those are the building blocks of carbohydrate, fat, protein. Protein has typically a nitrogen stuck to it, a sulfur. But those are what our bodies use to basically build things and to burn for energy. We also obviously need vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all the beautiful things that help our bodies move and function. Next slide. These are the bad stuff. Once again, carbon and hydrogen. So the problem is when these enter our bodies, they can interact with the cellular mechanisms, and that causes problem. And we don't even know all of the things that can go on, but we absolutely know certainly the benzene, the toluene, the aromatics on the bottom, extremely dangerous for us, carcinogenic. The smaller molecules that are more airborne gas, certainly interacting with our lungs and our cardiovascular system. Next slide. So here's our cooking factory. Again, complicated and simply amazing. The nucleus with the DNA that is translated into RNA, which builds the proteins. I know these are all fancy words, but most of you all kind of get the gist of it. But the mitochondria are converting those energies from sugars and fats into chemical bonds, which we use. We build proteins. We're building, constantly rebuilding cells with mitosis. Meiosis is the separation of cells turning into basically the gonads and babies that form from that. Really critical to not have anything go wrong. Next slide. You put a bunch of these together and you got a human. I mean, it's amazing. The physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, how one cell knows how to develop into a nerve cell, into a heart cell, into a lung cell, is just incredibly important. But the phenomenon of interfering with those functions will get us into trouble. So understand that we are these little beautiful cells all put together, all working together, and you really don't want to perturbate them, meaning you don't want to make anything go wrong if you can avoid it. Next slide. So this is the hard part, and I get it. Methane has been on the earth forever, but in tiny amounts. We've never, as Laurie mentioned, put holes in the ground, used this high pressure fluid that has lots of, not a lot, but chemicals in it and sand particles. I mean, we pulled oil out of the ground when it used to be in large deposits, but now we have to force it out, and up come these other things. We really don't know how dangerous they are in lower exposures, but definitely when we get moderate to large, we know. Cancer forms, heart disease, lung disease, problems definitely with pregnancy. Next slide will show that. So the endocrine disruption, we have beautiful specialized cells in our adrenal glands, in our thyroid, parathyroid, in the brain, the gonads in males and females, estrogens, testicles. They need to basically be working perfectly well. to make sure that you get what you need and your body's functioning. When a baby is inside a mother, oh my goodness, you're going from one cell to two cells. Nothing should get in the way of that miracle. And the baby's coming out highly susceptible to these products. And obviously, we know bone marrow cancer. This is a picture of kind of leukemia. These are absolutely known effects that can occur. And again, the goal is to avoid, if at all possible. Next slide. So that's kind of the kind of went from the microscopic cellular human being. We're still dealing with human beings, but here we're dealing with larger issues with communities. So air pollution, ozone is a problem. It's been a problem for a long time in the Front Range, and the bottom line is it's not going away. We were just downgraded from moderate to serious, and ozone, that's a product of the volatile organic compounds typically coming from oil and gas from our fracking wells, mainly in Weld County in Colorado, mixed with the nitric oxides coming out of the tailpipes of the car. You heat them up, and we have ozone. And I have a patient who actually says, Doc, when I travel out of Fort Collins, my asthma gets so much better. And we measure that with a device called a peak flow. And I'm very concerned that my colleagues aren't aware that the ozone in this Front Range is affecting us negatively. Next slide. So when you look at the local and regional concerns, the vulnerable community members, again, think of the babies developing, the fetuses, pregnant women, infants and children, elderly, poor, people of color, chronic medical conditions, so those with asthma, emphysema, heart disease, people that even have cancer are going to be at worse places. And I worry for the people that actually work on the well site. I mean, so many of them are saying, oh, this is no big deal. But just like the coal miners, when they came out of the minefield, were covered with soot. I mean, they suffered the silicosis in the lungs and other medical conditions, and actually at the beginning, nobody cared. They developed some strategies to help protect them. And I really worry about people going out for a run or exercising. It's bad when the ozone's high, when the VOC is high. And remember, you can't see this. Not part of the deal, and sometimes you can't even smell it. Next. So now the big picture, again, global concerns. We need water. And the other frustration for me is for fracking, you need tons of water to go in these wells. Well, we could use that water for other reasons. Potable means you can drink it, non-potable you can't. After you frack the water, it's a very low likelihood you'll be able to ever drink that water again. They pour it down in the ground and store it. But we have to worry that as our snowpack, our climate heats up, our snowpack decreases. This is critical. Next slide. And in the bigger picture, water scarcity is very, very concerning for folks that are living on the edge. And this is the environmental justice picture, which we're going to hear about next. But you can see in this picture, the United States is in the moderate water stress indication, but there are definitely severe and extremely severe high stress. And as the planet heats, this is only going to get worse. Next slide. To kind of piece it together, busy slide, I apologize, but just the fact that as the planet's heating up, we have to work in this hotter environment, dangerous for a lot of people outside. Folks with asthma, folks without asthma, respiratory concerns, worsening allergies, cardiovascular disease, that means heart attacks, strokes. Think about mosquito-borne diseases like Lyme and Zika. These are delivered through the sting of an insect. That insects will migrate as the temperature migrates. We are needing to be aware of this in the medical community. Water scarcity leading to climate migration, malnutrition, extreme weather. Gosh, what do we have in Colorado? Thankfully, we have some snowpack or snow that's occurring, really not snowpack, but hopefully that's going to douse some of the fires. But this is part of the deal, extreme weather. And then the big problem is, as we are kind of worried and freaking out, and mental health and depression. But next slide. Fortunately, I do think you're going to hear some opportunities from Jen at the end to get involved. And I think that's a big piece of it. I know it's frustrating to talk to regulatory group or a legislative group, but it's critically important your voices are heard. And as parents, as people like me in the medical community, this makes a difference. We saw the girl on the swing. This is for our future. This is for us, but really, really for our future. I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Shana Oliver, who has a unique perspective on how this is affecting certain populations, and we certainly need to be listening to her and moving forward with helping these groups that don't have a lot to stand with. Shana.
Hi, can everybody hear me? All right, so this is Moms Clean Air Force Colorado chapter presenting communities disproportionately impacted by pollution. And my name is Shana Oliver, and I am a field organizer for Moms Clean Air Force in Colorado. I am an Indigenous people's rights advocate, tribal affiliate of the Navajo Nation, and most importantly, I am a mother of 4 children, and we are descendants of the genocide known as the Indian Removal Act, known to the Dene people as the Long Walk of the Navajo. My family has migrated to Denver since the 70s, since the Relocation Act was enacted. My grandfather came up here to further his education so that he could work on the coal mine and plant back on the Navajo reservation. And he was among, before that, he was among the Navajo men that mined uranium without protective gear. And many of these things have impacts on all Navajo people's health back on the reservation. And he had to retire early due to his frequent asthma attacks on the job site. So he died 2 years ago due to leukemia at the age of 77. So we are very impacted, and as Indigenous people, we have a long history of injustices forced upon on our land, culture, and health, and as well as our families. When we leave the reservation, we are systemically segregated and redlined into communities that are near highly polluted areas, near refineries, highways, industrial zoned areas, and waste sites, as well as lack of access to clean water. And I think that has a big impact on our where we live as in our communities. These communities tend to be where affordable housing are, and as well as Indigenous people, we have the highest disproportionately impacts of asthma, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, leukemia, mental illness, birth defects, and premature deaths than the general population. And in Colorado, I see environmental injustices playing out for people of color, such as those living near Suncor Refinery in Commerce City, and those living in oil and gas operations. Next slide. So through these studies, we know African American, Latino, Indigenous, low income, we tend to fall in these areas that are disproportionately exposed to higher rates of air pollution. We have a poor air quality currently in Colorado. We have an F grade by the American Lung Association. If you sign up with Oil and Gas Threat Map.com, you will be notified of your air quality in your county in any state that you live. And here in Colorado, we've been a high risk for yellow risk level as well as orange risk level, which means that we are being exposed to high emissions of ground level ozone smog, which is very detrimental to our young children, our newborns, whose lungs are still developing. So next slide. And here we have the pictures of what those disproportionately impacted communities kind of look like. So you got on the left upper picture, top left, you have a highly affluent white neighborhood, which you see many trees around and grass, of course. And the top left right is the Navajo Reservation with the coal plant right in the background. You can see as your scenery, as well as on the bottom pictures on the bottom left and right is Northeast Denver area and Commerce City area. Like, this is what we're being admitted to. These pictures show clear signs of ground level ozone smog that is coming in contact with our communities and as well as our children in their playing areas and their school fields. This is what we are breathing on a daily, and we need to speak up on these things. Next slide. And why are communities of color being impacted by pollution? Studies by the NAACP 2012 report, cold-blooded confirmed communities of color breathe in 40% more polluted air than white communities across the U.S. Communities of color are more likely to be located near high traffic areas, industrial zone areas, oil and gas refineries, coal plants, mining sites, and toxic waste sites. These communities need their elected officials and agencies to do their job and protect them from these harmful pollution that make our health worse. And children in these areas are experiencing nosebleeds, uncontrollable nosebleeds, as well as an increased migraines, as well as not being able to go to school because of these impacts. And that has an impact on lost days of schools, lost days of work. That has an impact on the overall economic wellness of these communities as well as their children. Next slide. And benzene spike at Belo Romero Academy Well of Greeley, Well County area of Colorado. It is an oil and gas development that had originally been planned to be next to a highly affluent white neighborhood with a majority of white students, which that community didn't want this oil and gas development there, but relocated to a majority of Latino school, placing it 800 feet away from their school's playground. And recent record state health officials have recorded a spike in benzene right outside of Belo Romero, which is a cancer-causing pollutant that is around oil and gas operations. So they couldn't make a conclusion as to an exact source, but they determine it's likely from the oil and gas operation. Next slide. So what can we do? We know that speaking up is very powerful. Community could you as community members. Great ways to get involved is to going to the office of your elected officials at the local, county, state levels, speaking at public hearings, and or if you can't make it to those places or spaces, written comments can go a long ways, and never doubt your voice and your story that needs to be shared and how you're being impacted in your community as well as your family and how's it having an impact on you and why we need to move in a new direction. Most importantly, children need our voice. They need us to speak up as parents, and I think it's very important that we speak up for our children. Again, I have 4 children myself, and I would like a future for them to be worry-free of these toxic wastes that we are leaving them behind. So let's have a plan for them. Next slide. All right, and again, your story is the most important. no matter where you're from, your voice is very powerful. No matter how little you think your story is, it can go a long ways with your legislators. You never know how heartfelt they are. So you can take action with me by emailing me at soliver@momscleanairforce. I also hold a community discussion every 2 weeks on Sundays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. And we discuss updates about public hearings, as well as have community members share platforms of how they're helping or how they can get resources to the communities. So join us on Sundays. You can email me if you like to be on there and be a part of the discussion. So you can become a member and check us out on Facebook, and I will hand it off to Jen Clanahan, and who will be speaking next. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shayna. And thanks to everybody for joining us tonight, spending a bit of your evening with us. I'm Jen Clanahan. I'm the Colorado State Director for Mountain Mamas. You can see my email address there. I'm at jen@mtnmamas.org. So we've heard a lot tonight about methane and related pollutants and the serious impacts that they have on our kids and frontline communities and our climate. But I do have some good news, and that's that we can impact the policies that determine how much methane and other pollutants are in our air. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of ways that we can all create change. You can participate in a demonstration, as we see some folks doing here. You can write a letter to the editor. You can meet with legislators, and you can participate in public hearings that regulators are holding. And these are really important opportunities because it is really effective to meet with decision makers in person and to meet with them when they are in the middle of a decision-making process. So the fact that we have 2 of these coming up is something that we need to take advantage of. You can see, as Laurie mentioned, that the Air Quality Control Commission, AQCC, is holding a hearing on September 17th from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. And they're going to be discussing air monitoring. And the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, the COGCC, they're holding a public hearing on new rules around flaring. And actually that September 28th date has just been changed. I just got word from Matt a little bit ago that that's actually being moved out to the last week in October. So everybody who's on our lists, Mom's Clean Air Force and Mountain Mamas, will be keeping you updated on those dates as we get them from the COGCC so that you can participate in those hearings as well. Next slide. So we hope everybody can sign up and attend these hearings and speak out and make your voice heard. And I wanted to give some tips for folks who hadn't done that before on how you can make effective comments. The first thing that I always tell folks is to be respectful. The folks that sit on these commissions are volunteers. They are spending hours, weeks of their time on these issues to volunteer on these boards. And they're human. So if they feel attacked, they're going to shut down to some degree, and your comments are not going to be heard by them as well. So I always say, you probably have heard the saying, you catch more bees with honey than with vinegar. It's true. Tell your personal story, as Shayna was mentioning. Why does this matter to you? How does it impact you or your family? Maybe you have someone in your family with asthma, or maybe you're concerned about how climate change is going to impact your children. Whatever it is, there's literally no wrong answer. Nobody can tell you that that's why you care about this issue. So speak up, put a human face on these rules, and tell them why it matters to you. I know that a lot of people, and women in particular, will not speak up if they don't feel like they're an expert on the issue. And you absolutely do not have to be. You're already an expert on what you're talking about, which is why this matters to you. These are public hearings where the commissioners expect to hear how these rules are going to impact Joe Schmo, all of us, regular folks. And they're not going to ask you technical questions. They're not going to ask you any questions, actually. So you don't need to be an expert. Make sure your ask is something that they can actually act on. We've already taken care of that by attending these hearings when they're in the middle of a decision-making process. State clearly what you want. In this one, I can offer some guidance. I'll get to that in just a second about some specific policy asks. But you can also just say, you know, I care about climate change for whatever reason. I care about these pollutants for whatever reason, and I would like to see you enact the strongest rules possible. And that's what you want. You're asking for the strongest rules possible. And that is a perfectly acceptable ask. Write up your comments beforehand. For as many times as I've done these things, I still write up my comments ahead of time. And I recommend that for a couple reasons. You want to make sure that everything that you want to say is included, that you don't forget anything. And if you get nervous, you might forget what you were going to say. And you can also time yourself for these hearings. When you are called on and it's your turn to speak, you have 2 minutes, and they're pretty strict about cutting you off when your 2 minutes is up. So you'll want to time yourself once you've written everything up and make sure that it's within 2 minutes if you've got a little bit more time or if you need to cut something out. Speak slowly, be concise, and have no more than 3 points. Pretty general comments or tips for any public speaking. Next slide, please. So, as we've mentioned, the AQCC is holding a hearing on September 17th. It's on Regulation 7 on air quality monitoring, and they are going to address monitoring and controlling emissions that occur during drilling and before production takes place, known as pre-production, emissions from natural gas-fired engines used on site, and oil and gas injection facility controls. The Air Quality Control Commission is considering requiring air quality monitoring during well drilling, fracking, flowback, and 6 months into production. This is great. This is a good first step, but the rules can be clarified a bit and made stronger. And that's what we recommend for our policy ask during the comments. Next slide. Specifically, every location should require air quality sampling to detect hazardous air pollutants like benzene in order to help protect public health. And every location should require continuous or high frequency monitoring to better understand emissions of climate pollutants and ozone precursors. The AQCC should also apply the monitoring program statewide. There are going to be some that argue it should only be in high pollution areas, but we believe it should be statewide because every Coloradan deserves to know if they are breathing hazardous air pollutants, and also because statewide application of the rules is critical to help address climate change. These pollutants aren't going to stop at county lines, for example. Next slide. The AQCC should require pollution controls during pre-production in order to fill loopholes in the current rules. We would also like to see waste injection wells monitored. It's been found by researchers that they release benzene, which is a known carcinogen. So those locations within 2,000 feet of homes should be required to also utilize continuous monitors. And lastly, we would like to see transparency, both in the air monitoring plans and data. The rules should require operators to make data and analysis available to the public because publishing of the monitoring data and the results is essential to ensure public trust and buy-in to a monitoring program. Next slide. So this is the link where you can sign up to speak at the AQCC, and we'll put this in the chat feature so that it is clickable for you. Just to be clear, there are two different links here. The first one is to sign up just to attend the meeting, and that's going to be via Zoom, and they'll send you the link for that. And then the second link, you need to also click on that, put in your name and email address, and that's how you actually sign up to give comments. So how it works is you will receive the Zoom link once you've signed up, and at 4:30 on the 17th, you follow that link and you'll attend the Zoom meeting, and they'll just go through one by one and call folks' names that have signed up to speak. They'll unmute you and take care of all that stuff when it's your turn. You'll read your comments for 2 minutes. They'll say thank you, and then they'll move on to the next person. It's pretty much that simple. Next slide. The COGCC hearing that's going to be happening that last week of October will be to look at some new rules on flaring. And again, we'll get you more information on that, but just really quickly to go through a few asks that we have on those as well. Next slide. We would like to see them eliminate all routine flaring so that it should only be in response to emergencies, for public health and safety, and only for a short period of time. Existing wells should not be exempt. And also, we believe that the COGCC must ensure that the industry meets the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals set under HB 1261 to protect public health and the environment. And they have to look at the cumulative impacts of the industry. Next slide. And this is just a quote that inspires me when I feel like I'm too busy to attend all these meetings or give comments, because we need all of our voices out there. I can't encourage you enough to participate in this process because it does make a difference. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And with that, I will turn it back over to Patrice for questions. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. It's Patrice Tomczyk from Moms Clean Air Force back with you to open up the question and answer session. But first, I'd like to introduce Matt Sura, who represents a number of nonprofit organizations and community members with issues related to the AQCC and the COGCC. Matt can help answer the oil and gas technical and policy questions. And now I'd like to have all our presenters join us for the question and answer session. So while everybody's coming up, the first question that we have is for Dr. Carroll. And the question is, has the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment done any air monitoring?
Oh, absolutely. They have been collecting data. Some of the problems, though, as Laurie pointed out, was that it's not a continuous process. And so I think in this whole picture of what's happening to environment, we have folks that are trying to do their best, but at the end of the day, they're not capturing the information we need to really make concrete decisions. But the evidence, there was an article published in 2017 by a large group that indicate that fracking causing chemicals are present, and the closer you live to a well, the more problematic. I really advocate for more studies and more data. One of the pictures I think Laurie had was of Dr. Helmick, who's a wonderful atmospheric science professor who had unceremoniously problems with the Boulder campus, but he has a beautiful system, and we need more science evidence data, and that can help us move forward with decision making for our communities. But as Shana indicated, oh my God, the folks living near these petroleum refineries. I grew up in Aurora, and every time I drove by there, I would just get nauseated, and I couldn't imagine living there. So we really need to step it up. This is critically important.
Yes, couldn't agree more. Thank you, Dr. Carroll. Next question is for Matt Sura. And Matt, we did have a little conversation, and I just wondered if you could share with the group some of the information that you had heard from the COGCC about the importance of people speaking up.
Sure, glad to. I'd just like to reinforce the points that Jen Clanahan was making. It means a lot to these commissioners to hear from the public. As an example, last December at an Air Quality Control Commission meeting, the commissioners actually said, we wanted to go on the record that we're taking action based in large part on public comment, and actually put that on the record in the statement of basis and purpose, because public comment was so overwhelming that they wanted to see greater air pollution controls. Just today, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, one of the commission members, the chair, stated essentially the same thing, saying, yeah, we've been hearing about setbacks from homes and the need for greater distances from oil and gas facilities to residential buildings, and hearing a lot of both public comment and very technical data, but we're really moved by both. And the public comment is something that we've got to respond to. People are being adversely impacted by oil and gas facilities, and we need to act. So it just reinforces how important it is for people to come out and speak to those agencies.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Couldn't agree more. And the next question is for Shayna Oliver. And Shayna, the question is in regards to Commerce City. I had heard that there was possibly fracking that might happen there. And this seems like a big environmental justice issue, considering the refineries there already. What's going on there?
Well, the COGCC, which is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, they have approved over like 3,000 wells to be permitted for oil and gas. And among those drilling permits are for the Arsenal area, which is northeast of Denver area, which is in which is just north of Commerce City, in Commerce City area of Adams County. And you're right. There's not enough being done for these communities that are going to be impacted with oil and gas development if they don't speak up. And that's why it's important to speak up at the Adams County City Council meetings every Monday. In your community in Colorado, we are having most of the city council council meetings are on Monday, and that is a great opportunity to speak out to these council members against oil and gas development in your community. And that's why it's important to be involved, write letters, join a group, and mobilize and strengthen your voice by having allies around you when you're speaking up, and create a network with your community members, with your neighbors, get them involved that like these things are coming to these areas. And the Arsenal is not only a refuge park, but they have like they not only have like the park, they have the bison that actually live on part of the refuge park of the Arsenal, and they are not being spoken up for as well, as this oil and gas development will put them more at risk when they're already in a confined area of lack of open space. And this is just more attacks on our open space in Colorado on top of this oil and gas development in our areas. And with Denver being extremely gentrified, even it's among the highest gentrified areas in the nation, and we're being pushed out of Denver into these northeast Denver areas that are around North Adams County and near Wells County and Garfield County, these counties that are being already impacted with oil and gas development on the north side of their neighbors. And with these new oil and gas permits are just coming even more closer to our single family homes of people of color communities. And we are being impacted all the way around, basically. And our air quality is the worst. We were already the 10th worst state before these fires, and these continued incidences with Suncor, 2 times, maybe even 3 times since the shutdown of coronavirus. And these areas are very highly impacted with the coronavirus, with the numbers of people infected and as well as the rise in deaths. So
Yes.
it is important to speak up
Yes,
at
it is.
council meetings. So we're not doing enough.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all your work, Shayna. I mean, you said it. We need, there's so much more work to do. We need as many voices as we can get involved. So thank you so much for all the work that you are doing on environmental justice. And I just want to, we're at past our time. So I wanted to thank everybody. It's now, I wanted to keep on schedule. So thank you so much for everybody for joining us. Mountain Mamas and Moms Clean Air Force wants to thank you for attending the webinar. And we also want to give a big thanks to Dr. Carroll from Physicians for Social Responsibility for presenting today, and Matt Sura for providing his technical and policy expertise. We'll respond via email to any questions that were submitted that we didn't have time to answer if you provided your contact information. And thank you for speaking up to protect Colorado's children from oil and gas pollution. Thank you all.